Alrighty. So this is an old game for the Super Nintendo. It has a couple of modes. Mostly I'm a fan of the arcade survival mode. Anyway, it's pretty simple. In this game, you shoot the bubbles. It has a nice soundtrack. I think so. I mean, you be the judge, obviously. Overall, it's chill. Perhaps a little less thoughtful than Islanders, but sometimes you want a smart game, and sometimes you just want to shoot some things, you know? Oh, that's a big boy. Okey-dokey. Ooh, and it's getting faster. Which it does sometimes. Good. So I play a few retro games on this stream. Perhaps kind of a lot of them. I've been on something of a tour of old games. Games like Super Metroid, Zelda 3. Now, perhaps those games have more rapport than this game, but you know, when a game has something of a special place in your heart, a place in your history, at least, you know, it's something different than a game which is, you know, much lauded. You know, other people, they have their Super Metroid, and they like it. But this game is like that for me. Ow. Okay, there we go. It's a little hard to provide meaningful commentary over a game that's, you know, sufficiently fast-paced. Yeah, I do what I can, but perhaps it should be noted that my abilities are limited, and what I can do is sometimes not all that much. But really, that's the truth of existence, you know. You do what you can, but sometimes what you can do is not that much. Oh, half the human condition is just finding peace with that fact. Now, of course, there's a little bit of it that's getting over that. And by getting over, I mean overcoming. You know, you start not very capable. We've all been young and not very competent. But it's a thing you can get over. Sometimes. Now, there are skill ceilings, of course. Levels of skill which simply cannot be overcome. At least by human players. But until you reach the skill ceiling, things ought to look pretty alright. Ooh, okay. Spooky. Oh, heck. heck, dude? And some of skill ceiling is mental, and some of it is physical. Some of it is, how fast you can move your hands, and some of it is how fast you can move your mind. And the trouble with skill ceilings is not everyone's skill ceiling will be the same, because our physical limitations are different. The limits of our skill depend somewhat on the limits of our physical capabilities. And physical capabilities, just like physical build, differs from person to person. Dang it. Okay. Oh, okay. Dang it. Some of our brains work faster and some of our brains work slower. Just as a matter of how we are. And so sometimes a fast game will be too much for us. And the skill ceiling will be comparatively low. Sometimes our hands don't work like they used to. Or sometimes we don't have very good hands for video games. And in that case too, the skill ceiling may be lower for us. So close. Okie dokie. And that's arcade mode. Also, this game calls it panic mode. But that's arcade mode for Super Buster Bros. I like to boot it up from time to time when I'm feeling like a reflex and quick thinking challenge, which isn't always, but sometimes. Alright. Might do another round. I have about half hour to an hour left of the stream. So in addition to panic mode, there's also tour mode, which is your standard version. It's a more structured, well, a differently structured more adventure, like stage-based kind of thing. And both have their merits. Some of the levels in the stage-based one get a little bit frustrating, especially near the end. So generally I stick to the arcade version and call it a day. Which is not how it used to be. This is one of the games that I played a long time ago. When I played it then, I was more of the adventure mode guy. But now I'm more of the panic mode guy. Partly just as a result of how your interests change over time. Okay, don't do that. Take that. I briefly considered speedrunning this game for a while. But I can't say I'm really interested in the tour mode quite that much. For those that are, more power to them. But for myself, I can't say I would count it among my interests. There we go. Okay. The goofs were done. Don't do that. Don't do that either. Don't do that either. Okay, here we go. That's nice. Forgot that was there. Alright. 1 second. Alright. And I'm back. I try not to dwell, at least in excess, I suppose that is the often omitted context. When they say not to dwell on a thing, they mean not to dwell to the point where it becomes unproductive. To the point where it becomes no longer serviceable. I like to indulge in the past, indulge in nostalgia occasionally. Try not to let it become a habit. It's important to see the past as it was, when possible. Now it's not always possible. There was a sentiment that someone brought up in a chat. I forget what chat and I forget who. But the sentiment was something like, you're allowed to like bad games. As long as you understand them, that you liking them, as long as you understand that you liking them doesn't make them good games. And this, perhaps, the fundamentals of it feel good. It's, at heart, a good game. Now, is it the best game in the world? Obviously not. Everyone knows that Bubsy 3D is the best game in the world. Kappa. But, in seriousness. In seriousness, I don't know. What is there to say in seriousness that cannot also be said in jest? I don't know. The subject of nostalgia and what we should do about our own rose-colored memories, it's perhaps a tricky subject. There's a subjectiveness about it. You know, because we're human people. Our cute little brains are made of meat. They inherit all the trouble that meat-based systems inherit. I mean, I wouldn't guarantee that a silicon-based system would be better, per se. Perhaps that is the implication when we speak ill of meat-based computing. Perhaps the implication is that a non-meat-based solution would be ideal, but at the same time, that's the classical divide between, you know, the thoughtful, emotional human being and the detached clinical robot. That's the meme of the thing. To say one is objectively better than the other, here's the problem about objectivity. You have to objectify things. You have to take away the subjectivity. You have to take away the feeling of a thing to rank it objectively. But that's the problem. Whether a game is good is a subjective question. Now, obviously, there are agreed-upon design principles that they're mostly agreed upon. But, you know, just take care when trying to put objective clarity onto the subjective. I'm not saying it can't be done, I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but damn it. In any case, enjoy what you enjoy. Hell, you're only going to enjoy so many things in your life. There's more than enough things to not enjoy. Probably not going to enjoy, you know... No one enjoys doing their taxes. But it's still a thing that happens. Still a thing to be done. So please, enjoy what you can. Regardless of whether your enjoyment of it is right or sensible or whatever else our enjoyment is supposed to be by, you know, by some abstract intellectual standard. I guess the gist of what I'm saying is be true to yourself. Be honest about what you like, what you don't like, and even why you do and don't like it. But also, you know, be honest about what you are and what you like. But be honest about what things are and what things are like. This level is terrible. Looks terrible, certainly. Yeah, I recall dying on that level a lot. There's a lot of little bubbles you gotta... A lot of bubbles that need sorted. Okay, well, and we're done here. Good. That's the last of that. Alright. There's a game plan and a tactic for most of these levels. So, I would think this is a pretty good speedrunning game. in that you can form good strats for it. Now, maybe there aren't. You know, you got your crazy wall clips and whatever else a speedrun might be lauded for having. But just having a game you can plan out. That's worth something, you know. Ow. Alright. Is there one up there? Yeah. And there's a technique for this one as well, but I forget what it is. Well, that's nice. Some of these levels have hidden power-ups. It's just a product of the era. It comes with the territory. And yes, perhaps that's bad game design. In some cases, almost certainly. But, you know. We keep moving forward. We make new games, we polish up old games. We learn from the past. You know, and the games are better for it. It's the stages like this that are the scariest, but the most satisfying to overcome. Oh, I remember this level. Yeah, this level is rough. The bubbles will sneak under the level. And you don't want the bubbles under the level, because then they come out of the level. And they do so when you least expect it. The game will throw shade at you for playing on easy as well, but, you know. What are you gonna do? Alrighty, well, it's just short of noon my time. I think I'm gonna call that a stream.